Welcome to the Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery, where every death had a life and every life had a story. My name is Jennie.
And I'm Dianne Hartshorn.
And we have another fabulous guest joining us today.
Yes,
but
very
before we
excited.
introduce her, we want to remind everybody that the 48 state tour with Atlas Preservation is happening now. I'm not sure where they're at this week as we're recording. It's funny because we follow them on Instagram.
Right.
And I see all their like videos and stuff that they're putting up every day, and they talk about which cemeteries they're in, and they'll put up little videos of the types of stones that they're working on for that day or whatever. But the last few days for me have been a bit crazy with theater camp and work, so I haven't paid strict attention. So I apologize, Atlas Preservation, that I'm not where you're at. But as we said last week, this tour is in the lower 48 states. Atlas Preservation goes to one cemetery and actually in a couple of states, more than one cemetery. They do an all-day program to teach about restoration and preservation techniques. It's free and open to anybody who's interested in going. So if you, whatever state you're in, besides Alaska and Hawaii, take a look. If they're nearby and you're interested in learning and maybe you haven't done a lot of preservation or even just cleaning the headstones or anything, this is a great way to get started because you will learn some really good techniques, some of the best practices that people are using currently. And it, like I said, doesn't cost anything. And they have been doing this for years.
Yeah, John Appel's been to our cemetery. This will be his third time. So we're very excited about that. And he is amazing. I mean, his knowledge, his skill, if you've even had a hinkering of a thought of wanting to get involved with the cemetery, cannot recommend this workshop enough.
Yes. So make sure you check. We have links in the show notes, and I should actually put a link on our website. I'll put a link on our homepage for that. So if you're interested, take a look. We do have them coming to Colorado, July 13th. Right? Yeah, July 13th.
Yes, July 13th in Colorado Springs, and I believe it's July 12th. They're going to Victor, Colorado. Yes.
Which is, for those of you who may not be as familiar, Victor's not too far from Colorado Springs, but it's up on the mountains. Like you have to actually go up into the mountains.
Cripple Creek and
So two great cemeteries that they'll be working out of here. So feel free to join us on either one of those days. Again, if you're interested in learning the preservation. So with all of that in mind, we are going to move on and introduce our guest. We are super excited about. Tui has been very involved in cemetery travels. She writes books about cemeteries. She gives tours. She gives lectures. It was so funny. Dianne had been following her for a while and had sent me a link to her website and said, hey, we should maybe have her on the show. And then very shortly afterwards, we had Lauren Rhodes on the show, which was just recently. And Lauren said, have you guys talked to Tui yet? And I said, she's actually on our list of people to contact. So right after we recorded with Lauren, I actually did reach out to Tui and invite her to join us. And it happened to be good timing because we were able to catch her in between travels. Yeah. So we would like to welcome to the show today, fellow Taphile, Tui Snider. So welcome.
Welcome, Tui.
Well, hello there. Thank you so much for inviting me. And that was awfully sweet of Lauren to give me that recommendation. I'm a fan of hers.
She is phenomenal. So we've had so much fun with the guests that we've had recently.
Gosh, yes. And wonderful.
Just Lauren, yourself, delve into the world of cemeteries, not afraid to get out there and learn about them and teach about them. And you have had the opportunity, I mean, you travel worldwide, so you've explored some really cool cemeteries that I've seen pictures of, but either I haven't been to that country or the few times I have left our country, I actually haven't been able to explore the cemeteries in the other countries. So looking forward to that. But before we get too into your travels, what got you interested in cemeteries in the first place? Where does that start for you?
For me, it starts when I was a little kid growing up in Virginia, and I was in the Girl Scouts, and this is in the 70s. So, back then kids could parents weren't giving you a ride to and from school. You
Right.
walked. When I went to my Girl Scout meeting, we walked there, and it was in a church. Right next to the church was this wonderful historic graveyard. So we would get there early and play in the graveyard, play on the stones. I mean, really not the safest thing.
Oh, you didn't know better.
No, and we would deem certain ones. We thought we were being, this one looks bad. It looks like it's falling over. I mean, we never got hurt. And in fact, this cemetery may have saved our lives, because one week we went to our Girl Scout meeting not knowing it had been canceled. And when it was time, we played in the cemetery, or the graveyard actually. And then we went in, and we're looking around. No one showed up except for this creepy janitor, who then proceeded to try and kidnap us.
Oh no.
Yes, and I'm 9 years old. He locks me and my friends. We're talking. We trust him at first, and he says, "Oh, girls, the meeting is actually going to be held here." And he takes us up to this room, locks us in, and it becomes pretty apparent that he has nefarious plans for us. And so we managed to escape by climbing out the window. Luckily, it was just on the first floor, but that was still, we got all scraped up. I remember it was scratchy bushes. And we were a little in shock. I mean, what just happened? I'm like, I think we're like, gosh, he was trying to kidnap us. How weird. Well, let's walk home. So we're walking home. All of a sudden, he pulls up in a car next to us, flips the door open, hits the seat, and just goes, "Get in." Well, when you're 9 years old and an adult says something, there's like a knee-jerk reaction. My friend actually got in, and I was like, "Lisa," and I grabbed her arm. I asked her later what happened, and she said it was just like automatic. An adult said, "Get in."
Gave me a command. So
so I pulled her out, and then she kind of came to her senses, and we just looked at each other and looked at the graveyard and knew that was where we needed to go. So we went running through the graveyard, which we ran through and played in all the time, right? So we knew how to zigzag all around and where it dipped down and this or that. Meanwhile, this guy was middle-aged guy. He probably could have easily caught these two little 9-year-olds, but he didn't know how to run through the graveyard. So I heard him like, "Ow, girls, come back. I just want to be your friend," and this and that. And then we knew where there was a little shortcut through the woods, and this, how to get home from there. So that was a very scary thing that happened. Like I said, that graveyard may well have saved my life.
Wow.
And this was before. So I wrote a book years later called 6 Feet Under Texas, because I can't resist a pun. And it's a travel guide to cool cemeteries here, and burial grounds and monuments to see. And one of the ones that have interesting historical significance, and one of the monuments, or one of the graves that I researched, was for Amber Hagerman. And I'm reading these newspaper articles, and I'm like, 9-year-old girl, Amber Hagerman. She was a Girl Scout. She had Barbies. One day she was walking down the street and she gets nabbed. And
oh my gosh.
Now that's why we have the Amber Alert. They made a backronym. It's like an acronym, except they make it fit a word that's already there. And that stands for her. And as I'm doing this research, I'm just like almost nauseated, and I really kind of flipped me out, because I was like, whoa, I'm looking at little pictures of her, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, and now, I mean, it could have been me and my friend. Back then, no one believed us because there wasn't the awareness. It was like, you girls just were playing mischief. We got in trouble. Actually, no one believed our big tall tale. Yeah. So I guess you could say cemeteries, graveyards, burial grounds have played a big role in my life. And then, when I was a teenager, my friends and I think we thought that we invented the whole tradition of having picnics in cemeteries. We were like, we're so cool. We've got our books. We're reading, Edgar Allan Poe while leaned against a headstone and eating a tuna fish sandwich. How cool.
So romantic.
It
so
was.
Cool.
And it was very quiet. I love bird watching, even back then. Just quietness, the peacefulness, I think, of the cemetery has always attracted me. And one of the things I'm really fond of saying is that, cemeteries are for the living. Even when I was way back when I was 9 years old, I think I had an inkling of that when I found a little robin's nest in the cemetery, and we realized, okay, we won't play over by that. But then, you see the little eggs in there and everything, and you realize that there's death there, but it's also nurturing life and nature.
Mhm.
And so I think that's a big part of their significance. And I think it's an overlooked part of their significance. I don't think that, now I'm going to get on a soapbox, but I think that especially now, I was just talking to someone and they were asking me, what purpose do you think cemeteries serve in this modern age? We're not superstitious. They were saying, we all know that you don't really need your body after. I mean, everyone has their own beliefs, but they were just being very blasé about it. Why waste space? I mean, they were really kind of confronting me. And
Right.
I said, you're missing the point. I think we need them now, maybe more than ever, because now we are so plugged into the internet, which I love, and social media, all these great things, and all these screens all the time. But when you go to a cemetery, it is one of the few places where you do feel obliged to put your phone down, at least for a minute, and actually engage with nature. And I think and if you're going there over a period of time throughout the year, you become acquainted with the changing of the seasons and this or that. I think it just helps re-engage people with the cycle of nature and those important things which can get overlooked. So.
Well, and I still think, depending on the individual, and this definitely is a personal thing, but like it's still a place where if you're currently grieving somebody, it's a quiet place to usually go and grieve and, have that time to yourself. Again, like you said, you're unplugged. You're not surrounded by screens and phones and traffic and people. And, and even when I do see other people in the cemetery, none of us, unless you're at a funeral together or you're doing an event in a cemetery, everybody's kind of in their own little spots. You see somebody else and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go this way and, leave them to do whatever they're doing. And,
although, remind me to bring this up. I don't know if now's the time or dog ear it will come back to. I had a really interesting experience in a cemetery in Romania about people interacting. So I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think I'll say now, I can say it later. I'll make a note.
And it's not that we don't interact, but I do know, and I have run into several times where I've been touring a cemetery. I don't know if touring is the right word because it's not like an official tour, but it's me exploring in the cemetery. And there are other people also exploring in the cemetery. And sometimes you'll like talk to each other for a minute or whatever. I do remember when we were in Plymouth and we had discovered that my kids had, through my husband's side of the family, had family buried in that cemetery, and we found the graves and every stuff. There was another couple there. They were also looking for ancestors' graves. So we did actually start talking, and then we were all like walking up and down the rows trying to find the different names.
Each other's. It's cool.
Yeah, which was a lot of fun and that was that moment where we connected with complete strangers in that moment. But it was a moment that we wouldn't have had otherwise, because when else are you going to talk to somebody about their ancestry that you don't know, like
just
that.
Don't walk up to someone on the street and bring up their ancestry.
Right.
Like, it's this like the history.
Right. And so this was one of those moments that I thought was really cool, getting to interact. And so, yes, I do agree with you. I think the cemeteries, yes, they're a place where we put our dead bodies, but they really are for the living for a lot of reasons. So they are still very relevant.
It was one of our guests, and I want to say it was Abraham, that said the cemeteries was a place of love.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really always liked that after he's shared that idea with us.
And another, getting back, I like that as a place of love. I think that people forget that they really do support biodiversity. There was a cemetery I went to in Cornwall, and I like how they proudly on their cemetery like information sign. I walked up thinking it's going to say, most cemetery history signs are like, this was established by an endowment by the such and such family and yada yada yada, and it's interesting history and everything. No, this one said our cemetery supports 50 species of solitary bee. We support 11 species of butterfly. And it goes on, it said, therefore we time our mowing, and you will notice some areas are very messy, in their own way. They explained that, like, right. And I was like, wow, they just came out and said, we need this space. We're providing a useful, there are plants that grow here that don't grow anywhere else that feed the specific, this one butterfly that comes through. And we don't, so if you see a stinging nettle, don't touch it, because that butterfly's larvae eat stinging nettles.
Oh,
and things like that. So I just thought that was amazing and such a wow, what a beautiful thing, this cemetery. And then as I'm reading it, people are walking by with their dogs, and it was a very active cemetery, and people were jogging on certain paths, and it was just really providing so much. And then the history and the beautiful monuments. I just thought
I
it was
love
a really
it.
wonderful place.
And it's such a great way to make a use, we're always clearing land to build more
Mm-hmm.
buildings and more parking lots and more stuff. So that I think as people have become more eco-conscious, they're realizing that the cemeteries are still one of those green places that we can still use that way, even with people buried there. So,
Yes. And when
and
you're in a cemetery, quite often, if it's a historic one, you will smell roses because
mhm.
those antique or heritage roses
Yep.
actually have a beautiful rose scent. Unlike, I was so disappointed the first time I ordered a rose out of a catalog, and it came and it was pretty and it didn't have any smell. And I'm thinking Shakespeare would just, what would he say now? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. No, he never met this catalog rose. It was like,
No,
Yeah,
oh,
no,
and
that's what we do in our cemetery. We're trying to save what's left of our old heritage roses, and
oh,
it's
that's
been a
great.
battle for quite some time. That's what I was out doing today because the roses are
Wow.
blooming. So we're photographing them to identify them. So,
Oh, that's wonderful.
and we also planted a pollinator garden in our old pioneer section, and we had to put a sign up because people were complaining that it was
Oh,
unkept and unmowed. And it's like, well, yeah, there's a reason for that.
people need to shift their perceptions. I saw down in Australia, there was one, I think, I forget which, it was Adelaide, I think. And all throughout the cemetery, they had several QR code tours you could take based on your
love
interest.
those.
Oh, it was so cool. But then throughout, you would see these signs, and this would say, "We are growing local heritage plants here to gather seed. We are things like that," which I thought
I
was
love
really
that.
great. They
I will
pointed, and there
have
was a
to, yeah.
bird houses throughout, and a bat house. And I thought,
Oh,
oh, this is so great.
I love that.
Yes.
See, making really good use of this space.
Yes. I'll have to look, check
Yes.
those cemeteries out. What a neat idea.
Yeah, I want to do more cemetery gardening. Like I want to go take cuttings and little things and maybe have a plot, little pun intended there, in my backyard where I have different plants that are heritage plants
Oh,
from
that would be
Texas. I just think
amazing.
that would be a really fun thing to do. I could
Oh,
make
yeah.
the I could make the little card that tells what they are look like a different kind of cross or something.
All the
I could
different
have all
That would
sorts.
headstones,
be
different
really cool.
styles. I
Oh, that would
love
be
that
so
idea.
fun. That would be really fun. I think I want
Cemetery
to do that.
garden.
Yeah, cemetery
That would,
gardening.
yeah, I think that would be
But
fabulous.
one of my friends wrote this great she wrote this great book called Cemetery Birding. You might want to have her on sometime, Jennifer Bristol. It's a
Oh, yeah.
really great book about for birders, but every picture it was taken in a cemetery. And then
Well,
she
in
talks about
our,
the symbolism and other things too. It's great.
was it, no, it wasn't Ed. Who was our guest recently that he had started out with pictures? He was birding and he started birding in the cemetery.
Oh,
Oh
Mr.
yeah.
Harwood. Was it
Thank you. Patrick Harwood. We just had
Patrick?
him on. I was like,
Oh,
sorry, we've had a lot of guests. I was like, but
I
he
know I
had,
got to catch up on your show. I'm really looking forward to it. That's the only way I get any like chores done is I bribe myself. And so I'm like, and plus if I listen to your show too, I'm like, well, it's for work, kind of, anyway.
it's
But I'm
research.
like, oh, I got something to catch up on. Anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, Patrick was that he was actually what interested him in the cemetery that he wrote about later. He was actually doing birding and
Mhm.
realized there were so many species of birds living within his local cemetery that you
Yes,
weren't necessarily seeing in other places, but the birds realized what a safe place it was for them to have their nests and their,
nature corridor.
yeah, it was and he ended up doing all this photography and doing a whole book on I forgot however many species he said was in
That's
that
quite a
first book
bit.
that
I'm
he wrote, but it was
surprised.
Yeah.
a lot. And it was such I mean, you had all the like from small like bluebirds to cranes to everything. And it was storks. That was the one thing because he
Yeah.
had a
Oh
picture
wow.
of a stork sitting on a branch of a tree, and
Huh?
I had never really pictured a stork sitting in a tree before. But I also don't know that I've seen that many storks in person either.
I've
Yeah,
never
but
seen them till I went to Romania. There are a lot of them nesting
Yeah.
there. They're huge and their
Well,
nests
and
are
that's
big.
And my association with storks in most cases is like the cartoon stork that's
Right.
carrying the baby, and you see him,
Exactly.
And so seeing a real stork nesting
Yeah.
in a tree was like the coolest thing. But yeah, he was discovering all these birds, and it was a landslide from there with everything else that he's done with cemeteries. But it is a great, and I know there's a lot of cemeteries that offer birding like groups and
Oh, yeah.
tours and stuff. So if you are really interested in birding, check with your cemetery, because a lot of them do have groups and stuff where they do meetups and stuff to study all the birds that are in those cemeteries.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Speaking of nature encounters in cemeteries, I had one in Bukit Brown in Singapore, and it's this it's right on the tip of Malaysia, and they got this jungle. It's basically jungle. Singapore has jungle running all through it. It's the only city I've really been in where I feel like I'm in the setting of a sci-fi movie, because they've got these big artificial tree structures that are really cool, and then they've got a lot of buildings have plants growing on them, like they're living walls.
Cool.
Oh, that is
But
cool.
Bukit Brown, Bukit just means hill, so it's Brown Hill. But Bukit Brown is this cemetery that is, like I said, it's jungle. I have pictures of me standing next to a fern frond or a palm frond that's like bigger than me. I was just trying to show,
Wow.
it's like you feel like you're in one of those, Island of Dr. Moreau, like an old,
Yeah.
like there should be a
Dinosaur movie.
Tyrannosaurus coming around the corner. But they had this big sign there and warning about different things, and one of the little warnings was for cobras. And then I remembered, oh yeah, I did meet someone telling me how they had oh yeah, if you run into a cobra, it will, stand up and look at you, and they said whatever you do, you can scream as much as you want because snakes don't hear, but just don't move at all. And I'm like, yeah. So I do live in Texas, and I did grow up in Eastern Washington, so I know how to kind of deal with rattlesnakes and things like that. And when I would walk to school when I was a kid and we had to walk through the wheat field in one part, we always had gravel in our pocket, and you throw it ahead of you. And, if you hear slithering, or rattlers are so great because they got that rattle on there.
Yep,
I
they
mean,
let you know.
for me, I like that. The whole idea. Anyway, so I didn't, long story short, I didn't run into a cobra, thank God, in Bukit Brown, but I was kind of hunkered down because talk about grave goods, and I learned a lot about Asian headstones, and I got a lot more to learn.
That
But
would be cool.
there was some different Chinese clans that are buried there, and I looked like the night before there had been one heck of a party, and I don't know what it was for. I was trying to find out what it wasn't. What time of year, it might have been, it was kind of in winter. It might have been, they do I forget the official name, but it's like a ceremony to make sure your loved ones stay warm in the afterlife, like you burn effigies of shirt things. So maybe it was that. I don't know. I could be totally wrong. But whatever it was, there were all these like next to the grave, the family grave, there would be like a little pavilion set up with chairs, like you're having a little party, like a tailgate party for a football or something. But then you see empty sake and other liquor bottles all around, and then tons of rice, little bowls of rice all around. A lot of them must have been left for the ancestors. Some must have been eaten. In the little pit where they were blowing up firecrackers. I mean, it must have just been crazy. I really want to meet someone and get to go to one of these things. It would be so fun. But I was just witnessing the aftermath. So I'm kind of hunkered down, trying to take a picture of these bowls of rice. And I hear a little thunk, and I look over, and there's like a troop of monkeys have just silently come down, and they're sort of like looking at me like, we want that rice.
That's
I'm
our
like,
rice.
okay, fine, you can have the rice. I'm backing away really carefully not to step on a cobra or something. Yeah, it's all yours. So then once again, I'm hunkered down taking another picture of like a statue, and I'm trying to see what it is. And I see some sort of shadow, and this time it's like 3 wild boar are going by. And I'm just like, ah! I'm looking around to make sure I'm not in between like a mama and a baby or something.
Right.
And then I'm like, oh crap, I should try and get a picture. And I didn't really get a good picture. I could tell it's just the tail end of a boar, but that was a pretty incredible cemetery.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, at least you didn't run into a cobra.
Yeah, thank goodness. No cobra. I did not run into a cobra. They also had a thing warning about ghosts there on their sign, which I thought was interesting. All the things.
All the and I think again, depending on culture, ghosts do play a big part in the afterlife. So I think for some of them, they want you to leave their ghosts where they are. So please don't remove them from their cemeteries, because they don't want them coming in to
Yeah,
the
I
rest
wasn't
of their,
planning on it. They can have them.
yeah, they can get, the ghosts can stay in their cemeteries. So you
That's right.
just, not too long ago, as you mentioned, we're in Romania. So tell us a little bit about that trip and those cemeteries, because uh, that's got to be found. I mean, we did for our Beyond the Grave series last year, we did Dracula, which
Oh yeah.
Romania is a heavy part of that story. So
Yes.
I'm super fascinated to learn more about these Romanian cemeteries.
Yeah, so my husband and I met a Romanian couple last year, and they're really sweet. And they invited us to come see them in Romania. And we were like, okay. We told them when we could come. We could come between this day and this day. And they said, fine, come for all. I thought they would say come for the third through the fifth or whatever. They said they booked it. They wanted us the whole 10 days. And they said, we will show you around what to do. I'm like, what? And
Love
so
it.
our friends, yeah, Constantine and Maria, they're the sweetest people in the world. And it was not only a crash course in Romania, it was a crash course in Romanian because they don't speak English and I don't speak Romanian. I
Oh
can
my
say
goodness.
like, Bună ziua, ce mai faci? I can say a little bit now. I can,
Right.
and you sort of get your, I love languages, so I would just dive in and just butcher it like crazy. I'll just, forget the grammar. As soon as I know a few nouns and verbs, I'm just throwing them around, and that helped. So we had a lot of fun. And one of the things, they took us to Brand Castle. They also took us to Sighișoara, which was where Vlad Tepes, who
Mm-hmm.
it was born and lived. So we visited the place where he was born, and then we went to Brand Castle. And I had to buy. I'm not much of a t-shirt person, but I had to
I
buy
love
this
it.
Of
this
course. How many
t-shirt.
times are you going to
And
get a t-shirt bought in
exactly,
Romania?
yeah, with yes, and it was so cute. Constantine was like, Dracula is our brand. I can't do his accent. He doesn't sound like, now I sound like Dracula. No, he didn't. Oh, but one of the things we did, and I was so worried that they were going to be offended. My husband has loved vampires ever since he was a kid, and he was like a goth before there were goth. Like when he was a teenager, I kid you not, he built his own coffin and he slept in it for a couple of years.
Well,
And so
love it.
the way I find this out is the first time I visit his family, I'm just flicking through the family album, and all of a sudden I get to a page where it's each of them are in a coffin, like his mom at 30 years old or something, and they all took turns getting into the coffin. They're all laying there like that, and they all had their photos taken. I'm like, okay, your brother's in a coffin. All three of your brothers are in the coffin. What is going
They're
on?
all still alive.
And yes, they're all still alive. And he goes, oh yeah, that was my coffin phase. I lived, he had that for a while, and then he ended up turning his coffin into a dark room, like a developer sink later on. He was a very creative fella, but so he's loved vampires a long time. So I bought these vampire fangs that you can put on
Oh yeah.
with denture stuff, and they stay
Uh-huh.
on really well. And so because it was funny, our hosts, Constantine Maria, kept teasing us like they had us on this 10-day tour of Romania, just bam, 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 seeing everything. And I'm a little sleepy one morning, and Maria comes over, she's like looking at, like, lifting my hair up and going, I don't see any bites on your neck. Why do you seem so tired this morning? Is it the Stragoya bites you?
Oh,
The
I love it.
Bricolage. They were bringing up all these things. So so like I said, Constantine said, yes, it's our brand. We have to take you there. We went to the castle. We wore the fangs to breakfast and tried not to surprise our friends. And I'm like, oh my God, they're either going to be totally offended, or luckily they thought it was hilarious. And
Aw.
then we wore them to the castle, and I forgot I had mine on because they're pretty comfortable. And you can have
I was
fun
gonna say once
walking
they're in
around.
place, yeah.
Oh, and I traumatized this poor kid because this little girl, I just see her and I'm just like, hey, I just smile at her. I think I went, Bună ziua. And she's like, I'm like, I was all like, what's wrong? Oh, the teeth, crud.
I still have things.
I still have fangs. And Larry, my husband, had the same issue when he went into the bathroom. He forgot. He smiled at a little boy, and the little boy freaked out and ran out of the bathroom. So yeah,
Those kids are
but
going home and saying there's real vampires in Romania.
I know they're gonna be on the. I don't know. I feel well. Anyway, yeah. So what can you do? But they took us. To some amazing cemeteries, and I have to tell you about. I think a lot of people have heard of this cemetery. It's called the Mary Cemetery. Have you heard
Okay.
of it? It's very. The funny thing is,
I don't know if I've heard of
Americans,
this one.
everyone, I've always heard of it called the Mary Cemetery, and it's in a place called Sapunța, and it's kind of North Romania. and it's in the Marmuresh area, and they're known for their wood carvings. So as you go along, you will see these wooden gates that are just elaborately carved
Oh,
with
cool.
crosses, and a lot of Eastern Orthodox imagery is, they're very religious in Romania, and
Right.
that was really interesting too. So we go there, and here I went. This is one thing. This is one thing I bought there. This is what the headstones look like. I wouldn't call
Oh,
them
cool.
headstones, the markers, and they're wooden,
Hmm.
and they have that little. Each one has the little, like, roof on it. Which, I mean, obviously, I need to learn more about this. I'm at a point, like, for my travels, where I feel like I need to digest it. It's the same thing happens every time I finish a book and I've done a lot of research. There's a period of a couple of weeks or so, or a month or whatever, where I don't remember any of it. Like, I'm like, oh no, I did all that research and I've got to do an interview. I don't think I remember any of it. And then it all comes together and clicks, and suddenly again I'm able to say, oh, in 1833, blah blah blah. But I feel like I'm at that point with my trip right now, where I'm trying to digest it. And so I'm kind of like, I don't even know what to say. But
These are
anyway,
cool.
so the
Yeah, they
Mary
are really
Cemetery is
pretty.
what they call it, and it's very unique. This is a specific blue. They're all the same color blue, which they call Sapunsa blue, which Sapunsa is just the name of their village. They It started with this fellow whose name I can't remember, and about 100 years ago, and he decided to, like, do the wooden carving monument. But what made them so unusual is that he did a little, like, they're almost, I don't know what you call that, kind of folk art style
Yeah.
representation of the people. And then he writes a little humorous limerick about them, or a little thing
I love
about,
it.
like, this is, brother Joseph, and he was never happier than when sitting next to someone else's wife, or something. Like, they just made these little jibes about them, that are just funny. Like the town drunk, they would make a little thing about it, and just kind of the known gossip that the villagers already kind of know about the people. He would sort of riff on them and make a humorous thing. Some of them
How
are a little more
cute.
serious than others. And so, yeah, and it's just kind of known, and it's very unusual. It's considered one of the seven wonders of Romania. And I'd never thought I would get a chance to go there. And so there we are. And I had my phone in airplane mode because I was taking so many photos.
Right.
And I thought, but then I got separated in the cemetery, as happens. And I thought, oh, I'll take it out of airplane mode in case they need to WhatsApp me and say, hey, we've left.
Right.
We're across the street. You go ahead. We're going to have a coffee while you continue to look through. So, well, I do that. All of a sudden, I have T-Mobile, and it goes, bing, welcome to Ukraine. You have this many. You have free text. I'm like, Ukraine. And I show it to Constantine when I find him, and he goes, oh yeah, we're less than a mile from the border, essentially. And I'm like,
Wow.
then as we are leaving, and then after that we drive south, thankfully, this big convoy of military vehicles with light flashes goes by, and he goes, they're
Oh,
headed to
wow.
Ukraine right now. And I'm like, whoa, that was a little
Real
not what
close.
I was expecting to have happen. I was like, welcome to Ukraine. What is going on? So that was a really yeah, if you ever get a chance to go to the Happy Cemetery, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah.
It's
I think that
very
might
unique.
have to become an episode
I
in
think
the
so too.
future.
Oh, it's
That whole
definitely,
cemetery.
yeah, yes. And when I get, I'll send you a link or something when I get an article up about it, because I really
Yeah.
want to write about it. It's pretty amazing. And then another wonderful experience I had was very different in Romania. We went to the city Iași, and it's considered kind of the cultural capital of Romania.
Hmm.
And which I didn't know. They told me this. I'm just telling you. I don't want to sound like I've got a lot of homework to do. I tell you, after this trip. But like what I do when I'm traveling, I have all these notebooks, and I fill up one for each
I
month.
love
And
it.
then this is all stuff like maps and things. And then one side is just all notes, like, Choizuya is a water basin with dippers, or, shrine etiquette
Oh,
for
that's a cool
Shinto
idea.
shrines. It looks like, okay. And then the other side, I just write, kind of a brief thing of what we did, and have
Hmm.
that. And then when I come home, I like all the things I want to look up are in there, which is, I've got a big pile of it now. But we went to this city, to the Cemetery of Eternity, and it was a Sunday. I think it was a Sunday. It was either Saturday or Sunday. It was a weekend. And we pull in, and the first thing I see is a coffee machine, like a machine with coffee and then a little snack booth there. I thought, well, that's interesting. I mean, a lot of cemeteries have gift shops, but I've never seen a full-on snack booth and that before. And then as we walk in, the joint is jumping. There are so many people there, and we get out, and I see a Eastern Orthodox
Oh,
a priest with the
Mhm.
robe, and that he's getting out
his full garb.
yeah,
Yeah.
his garb. And he's standing, he's got the censer, he's like waving incense. I'm smelling incense, and I look over, and there's a family gathered around, obviously a fresh burial, and they're singing a call and response thing. And
Oh, cool.
so I go and cross the street and think I give them a wide berth. Next thing I know, Maria's over. She's grabbed me by the arm. Tui, come here. You have to see this. And she's taking me over there. Like, look, listen, that's what we do. And this is a funeral. I'm like, I know. I was kind of like,
You're like trying not to think.
yeah, come on. She was nothing like that. And then we walk, and then she's like, come on, just follow me. So I'm like, okay, I'm just following you. So we start going along, and she sees a woman there who is like tending a grave, washing it, and she just walks up. Hey, how are you? What are you doing? Oh, who's buried here? Oh, that's your uncle. Wow, how nice of you to come and do this. You come here often. She's making chit chat with her about this, that, and the other. Meanwhile, Constantine and my husband have kind of headed off in another direction. And he said, I saw Constantine on the phone a lot. And my husband said, yeah, every time he would see, he said, oh, I know this fellow's nephew. So he'd call him up and he'd be like, hey there, I don't know, whatever, Joe, I'm standing at your uncle's grave right now. How are you? Blah, 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 blah. And that's what they did, is they walked all around. Anyway, Larry said, my husband, he said he's standing there, and this Romanian woman just comes up. She tugs on his sleeve, and he's like, huh? And she goes, here, would you like some cake? In Romanian. And she was offering him some, it's like, kind of like if you've ever had panettone, that really nice
Yeah.
cake. He turned it down. I'm like, how did you turn that down? That stuff's so tasty. I was taking a picture, so I missed out on the cake. But it was a really, okay, then all the benches, there's like guys sitting on the benches, they're drinking, everybody in Romania brews Tsuika or some other. Tsuika is a plum brandy or
Okay.
just whatever fruit they've got around. And there's fruit, and it's a very lush country. I mean, they are good gardeners. I think I should just go there and learn how to garden. But and apparently they know how to brew stuff too. So they're sitting there all drinking, and we learned eventually that yes, it's okay, it's legal, perfectly legal to drink in public. You just don't ever want to be drunk in public. And there was almost like a party vibe. It was just the weirdest situation I've ever had. I was like, is this what it was like maybe 100 years ago, 150 years ago, maybe, or however long ago at like Highgate or one of those cemeteries where I know people would go to see and be seen. Everyone was just chatting away, and, oh, where are you from? And these guys were just, men were just asking Maria questions, and
I love it.
she was showing me off. Here, show them you're Romanian. Tell them what about this or that. And one of her favorite. Yeah, it was just really the most unusual experience. I loved it. It was really great, but it was just such a different cultural thing where I was like, I better ignore everybody. And everyone was just bringing out sandwiches, sitting down. It was obviously their day's entertainment was to go there, watch people chit chat and talk about life, death, or, sports or whatever else. It was really wonderful.
That is so cool.
I love how it's like the public park feeling, where you go to the park to hang out, but they do it in their cemetery. That's awesome.
So chatty. And I'm thinking we're going to offend these people. Another thing, I saw another priest sitting down eating a sandwich. And so Maria nudges me like, you know what to say? And I'm like, what? So I go, pofta bona to him, because she's like, that's right. Because that means like bon appetit. So
okay.
But I was not going to say anything to him. He's eating a sandwich. And then he starts talking to her. And then she's like, oh, and so I took a picture with his permission of him and everything. It was just such a different.
What a cool
experience.
Social norms where I was like, okay, well, good. I was so glad I went with a local.
Right. Yeah, somebody who could tell you that this is fine. You can talk to anybody. You can be here. You can see it all. That's so cool, though, that you got to have that experience, because how many Americans can say they've been in that situation in another country, and you like you said, you wanted to kind of go around the funeral service and everything.
I don't want to offend anybody, and they that might have offended them if I pulled away. They might have thought I was being aloof. They wanted to talk, even
they're
if
like,
I
come join the
party very much.
I love that so much.
Have some cake. Yeah, it was really neat.
Oh, how cool. Now you are in the process of getting ready for another big trip, this time to Italy.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what that whole trip is going to look like and what your plans are there.
Yeah, it's so exciting. So I I have a newsletter that I put out
Mhm.
on the 1st and the 15th of each month. And a woman who's been on my newsletter for a while contacted me, I don't know, a few years ago. And she said, I do art tours. I live in Italy. And people come over who are artists and they want to sketch outside and this or that. And she goes, I just have this dream of doing a tour of taking them around the cemeteries. And I think it would be fun if you could, come and like explain the symbolism and some of the history before, while we walk around. So I was like, wow, yeah, that'd be great. But then I didn't hear from her for a while. And then suddenly I heard from her and she's like, the time has come. I really want to do this. I want to go to some, monumental cemeteries
Oh,
in Italy. And the monumental cemeteries are really different. They're kind of similar, like how everyone talks about how the rise of the garden cemeteries came about because people needed. You probably talked about it a lot on your show. I'm sure
right.
listeners are familiar with that history. Well, it was similar with Italy, except the monumental cemeteries are very mausoleum based and
Right.
maybe less garden oriented, but very lots of really for someone who loves cemetery monuments. I love skull, they really are open air museums for
Hmm.
I
these.
love it.
So we will be going from September 1st through September 10th. And like it ends on the 11th. We'll meet in Milan, and we're going to see four different monumental cemeteries: one in Milan, one in Genoa, one in Bologna, and one in Florence. And then
Oh,
we're also going to see the Church of the Bones. We're going to see some Etruscan tombs. We're going to walk around some
Wow.
villages. And my job will be to, when we get to each place, kind of give a little overview of what might be the predominant symbols there or things to keep an eye out for,
oh, cool.
important statue, just so like, so I've got a lot of, I've got a lot of homework. I've got this really wonderful book. Oh my God, I got to tell you about Gisela. Okay, so this is one of my homework books. It's called Italian Memorial Sculpture, and it goes into great depth of like piece by piece with it's just marvelous photos, really
Wow.
close-ups, really explaining what the influences are in the symbolism.
Oh,
So hopefully I will know what I'm talking about, or at least be
You will.
hopeful that I get there.
you'll be
And
great.
but yeah, so we're going to do that. And if anyone's interested, I guess go to my website and sign up for my newsletter or something, and
That
you can
is
find out
so,
about it.
so
But
cool.
I gotta tell you about Gisela before I forget. Okay, so I met her through my newsletter as well. My newsletter has just been such a treasure trove of, like, I just used to be the lone weirdo. I was no one was really interested in my cemetery interests, and so I just didn't really talk about it much to anyone. And then starting this, the newsletter, and suddenly people contact me, and they're the same. Oh, now I have somebody who actually cares. And if you ever come to, like a woman said, if you ever come to Scotland, let me know. So I went to Inverness and I
I
met
love
this
it.
woman, Dawn, and she met, took us around. Gisela said, if you ever come to Lisbon, let me know. And I had been to Lisbon the year before, and there is a wonderful cemetery there called Cemetery Prazeras. I'm probably saying it wrong now, but it translates as Cemetery of the Pleasures, which is a really interesting cemetery name because it's actually the burial ground is where they used to have festivals all the time. So the name just
Cool.
kind of carried over. So I think it's kind of neat. I was kind of like wondering anyway. So when you go there, you can't help but notice there's a 40-foot pyramid there, and it's actually the largest family mausoleum in Europe. It has a cemetery in front of it as you walk up, where it was built by the Duke of Lisbon, and he in the like 1800s, and he made a cemetery as he goes up for all his servants. And so all the men servants are buried on the right, all the female servants are buried on the left as you walk up. It's very Masonic. It's got all this Masonic
Oh, yeah.
I
symbolism
was
to it.
gonna say
It's got
with
the
the
checkered
pyramid,
path
yeah.
as you go up, and then the pyramid, yeah. And then you go in, and there's a statue by Canova. Well, when I first went there last year, I just tried taking pictures through the keyhole. I was like, man, I'd love to go in. I tried opening that door. Well, I met Gisela, and I said, hey, I'm going to be in, Lisbon on May 2nd or whatever it was. And she's like, hey, well, oh, that's great. I'll meet you at the cemetery, and I'll have them open the Palmella mausoleum for us. And I'm like, no, not the Palmella mausoleum.
Like,
And she's like, yep. And I wish I didn't get to see the key. They'd already opened it for her before we got there. We got to go inside, see the Duke's, fancy tombs. Like I said, there's a Canova sculpture there. And then go down into the crypt and walk all through the crypt and see all the vaults with all the different things. So that was just such a highlight to get to do that as well.
Yeah.
She's amazing. Another thing we did was we got to go into the chapel on site, and I had been there. It was closed when I was there before. She had them open it, and there's a museum exhibit about like flowers, the meaning of flowors.
Oh, cool.
On headstones. And that's a real weak point for me. I always have a hard time. I can identify an actual flower, but sometimes I'm looking going, what is that? Because there's a lot of poetic license, this, that, and the other. And one thing that had confused me when I'd been there last year was I saw all these thistles all throughout. And I'm like, what on earth are thistles emblems doing in Lisbon? What is there a big Scottish influence here? I just didn't know what to say about it. I have, my really massive, I don't know what this is file
right.
I'm constantly going through. And I have some pictures in there like going, must figure out why there's thistles in Lisbon. And she said, yeah, a lot of people think these are thistles, but they're actually a saudade, which translates to a like sorrow in Portuguese. And she said it means eternal sorrow. I forget. So like I said, I've got to go through all my notes, but these two different flowers together, like one of them meant eternity and the other meant sorrow. And so it was a way of saying eternal sorrow when you see them, or just sorrow. And so that was really amazing. She gave us like a 3.5-hour tour all through. I took notes. I'm going to pick her brain more too, because I know didn't think to ask everything. She had just finished writing her master's in she goes, yeah, I just finished writing my thesis. You got here good time. I just finished it last week, so I'm able to focus more. I'm like, what was it on? She goes, cemetery architecture. I'm like, oh, of course it was.
And that's why she was able to open it up for you. And how cool to be able to go into.
Gosh, yes.
I mean, that particular tomb is like the epitome of Victorian glamour and architecture and showing off your money and your wealth and stuff, that style. And I mean, the fact that he even had graves for the servants. I mean, wow.
Yeah, definitely wow.
It really was pretty amazing.
That's, how fascinating. No, I'm excited about your trip. I've been to Italy, not the parts of Italy that you're going to. Well, I've been to Florence. But when I was there, we didn't tour any of the cemeteries. The closest I really came was the catacombs that are underneath the Vatican.
Oh, good for you.
Which we did go down into that. And that was
would be cool. Yeah.
And just at that time, it was a small section, but it was still really cool to be able to go down there and see.
They're opening more of it, aren't they?
Yes, they are opening more. I just read recently, they've opened up a whole nother like section. And part of it is they had to make things safe because it's underground and forever old. And, you don't want to just open it up. But and then there were the occasional in both Switzerland and Italy, there were the churches where you'd come across sometimes the saints and stuff that are entombed inside the churches. That was the extent of my cemetery stuff when I was over there, but still really cool because like we don't really have that here. So it was still actually the first church that I was in Switzerland where there was the saint's body, and it was like the skeletal body, and it was all decked out in whatever garb and all this stuff. And it was one of those things where I like walked around the corner as I'm looking at other artwork and stuff. And it totally threw me for a loop because I had no idea that was even, I mean, I was 17 at the time. And so I had no idea that was even a thing that churches did. And I'm sure for our European listeners, it's no big deal. It's not
Yeah,
as
they're like,
common
oh
in
yeah, they
America to
got
have that.
Saint Joe's
So
finger in my church. What are you talking about? Yeah, no, but I know we don't see that in the USA.
no, I know. I mean, our Catholic churches a lot of times may have portions of a saint, like they will say they have bones from a saint or whatever, but we don't have these big fancy glass coffins where you see the
Right.
whole body laid out. So the first, it was a little bit of a shocker. After I got over it, I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. But I had no
Yeah.
idea that that was such a big deal. But yeah, so for our European listeners, I'm sure you guys, it's no big deal to you. But in America, we don't really do that. So it was a shock. But I think this will be really cool because you're going to get to spend time
Oh my
teaching
gosh.
one about some symbolism, which is a big deal. There's so much to learn on that front. Like
Oh,
you've
there
covered a
is.
lot in your newsletters, but even
Yeah,
still, I mean, I will think I know something and then I'll come across something that I thought I knew about, but it's completely different in another culture or something. And I'm like,
oh
oh,
yes,
like you said,
yeah.
like the thistle, what you thought was a thistle. And then they were like, no, when you put it together,
Yeah,
it
that's
means this.
interesting.
So it's hard sometimes when somebody asks you those questions too, because you're thinking, well, here it means this, and over there it means this. So I love that.
People forget that, like I get emails from people and they'll just send me a close-up of a symbol sometimes. And I'm like, okay, let's back. Do you have a larger thing? Context is important. What is the whole grave? Was this a specific section? If were you like in a Methodist section? Were you in a Jewish section? I mean,
Right,
if you see a
exactly.
picture, like not a picture, but a pitcher to pour water, if you
Mhm.
see it in a Jewish cemetery, it's different than if you see it in a like a Protestant cemetery.
Right.
So I mean, it's like it's the Levites if it's Jewish, or it means a pious woman if you see it
Hmm.
in a you know historic cemetery around me. I've got one where there's a woman who has a picture, and the epitaph talks about what a upstanding woman she was, an exemplary woman, and this that, but that didn't have anything to do with it's different, the same
Right.
symbol but very different meaning.
Anchors are another one that I think are interesting because we have some here in
Yeah,
Colorado where there's an anchor and people are like, why do people have anchors on their graves? We're not near the ocean.
right.
I'm like, well, it doesn't always mean, I mean, it can be for somebody who spent their life on the ocean,
Mhm.
but it can also
Yeah.
mean they were an anchor in their community. They were, again,
Yeah,
there's
and
the
a
different,
lot of times it stands for hope. So you've got
mm-hmm,
hope and charity and faith. If it's a woman holding an anchor, and
mm-hmm,
yeah, it's interesting too that the anchor was an ancient secret symbol for Christianity, because we all think about the fish being a
right.
secret symbol, but the
Mhm.
anchor was one too.
Because it kind of
Mhm.
has, the cross
Yeah.
representation at the
Mhm.
top.
Mhm. Yeah,
But yeah, I love anchor. Actually, anchors are one of my favorite symbols to come across in
they
the
are
cemetery. And
really
then to
neat.
try and decide, I mean, sometimes you don't have to even think about what it's meaning because it might even tell you on the headstone why they put the anchor there. But other times you do kind of have to think about, well, why would they choose this particular
Yeah.
thing to represent this person? So I do love a
I
good
saw a
anchor.
lot recently in Australia that were really beautiful anchors with really great chains. And just obviously, this
Oh,
person,
cool.
you see sometimes a rendition of something and you're like, this person never saw a camel or before, or whatever, But yeah, this person knows their way around an anchor, or actually saw actual anchors. That was
Right.
in Scandinavia, just actually huge, big. I'm like, how did they
Oh,
move this
wow,
thing?
that would
It's
be
huge.
cool.
Yeah,
I know those.
Somebody
and in
be
both
running
cases
off with them.
they were for seafaring people. They were captains
Yeah.
or sailors or
Oh,
you know.
so cool. Yeah, those real anchor, like a real anchor from a real ship, a lot bigger
Yeah.
than we think of them in our
Oh,
heads when
they
we
took up the whole plot. Yeah.
they're huge. Yeah, they're but I mean you have to think about the size of the ships that they're meant to stop. So and
Oh
to
yeah.
hold into place. So an anchor is a
Mhm.
big thing, but yeah, those are always, and maybe it's because I'm also the daughter of a sailor. Maybe that has something to do with my
Oh,
love of anchors.
Oh,
I
that could
would say
be.
so. I would guess
And we
so.
live in Colorado, and it's just something you don't think about. It's
I
like it's probably a
Oh,
combination of everything.
yeah. I mean, I do love the ocean. I just don't
yeah.
happen to live near the ocean, but I do like
I
to visit when I
know.
get the opportunity. So it is
You
a
know, you mentioned Colorado, and I've got to give a shout out to Ken, my friend Ken, because he's on my newsletter and he's from Colorado, and he does some of the funnest things. He created, I was going to wear one of his buttons. He gave me a button. It says, "I'm a morning person," but it's spelled
I
Mourni.
love
I love it, love
it.
it. And he gave me, okay, he created this thing called the Afternoon Tea League. And what they do is they go to a historic cemetery and have a full-on tea dressed in
Oh.
kind of Victorian, Edwardian garb.
Yes.
And I've had some Zoom teas with him before,
Oh,
for the afternoon tea league. And now he's created in his own backyard some sort of a cemetery kind of thing where they can have their teas out there. I've got to do an article about him because
Yeah.
it's such a fun thing
Uh-huh.
that he does. I really love it.
That is something Diane and I have been wanting to do. We
Mhm.
just haven't pulled the plug on that because we've been doing other things, but like that is to do a
Maybe you live
Victorian
near
tea in
him.
the cemetery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Full costume, full the food, the tea, the everything. It would just be
when the roses
Yeah.
are blooming.
Oh, I should send you some pictures of their teas. I was amazed.
Yes.
I had a nice tea but they have the full like a hat with feathers and the outfit, and he looks amazing. And then she makes like, they have all these different tea sets. Like for the Halloween tea, I think she had a skull tea, pot and everything. It's so
love
great.
it.
Yeah. Really,
Oh.
really neat. Let me
Oh,
make a note. I
and he
gotta
lives
send
in
you a picture
Colorado,
of
and
it.
we don't know who this man is.
You've got to know
I know.
Ken Patty. Okay, I will connect you guys.
Definitely, because they sound like so much fun. Like
Mhm.
they're our
Yes.
kind of people.
I know. I'm like, why does he have to live so far away? But maybe he can connect with you.
There we go. And then, we'll plan a tea party or what. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to maybe tell, but this is all my Alice in Wonderland collection. And there is an
I was
antique
looking
tea
at
set
that.
in there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That sounds like fun. You have the wonderful opportunity to just travel and visit
I'm
so
very
many
lucky.
cemeteries
Of course.
within our country and then also outside of it. Like you've been to so many worldwide
And you know
countries.
what's interesting is I never thought I would get to. When I wrote my first cemetery themed book, Understanding Cemetery Symbols. At that time, my wonderful father-in-law was living with us, and he had dementia, and so it was 24/7. I'm a writer, so I was
Mhm.
home. I was with him around the clock, and my cemetery visits were mostly on the way back from a doctor's appointment or something, or
Right.
if dad was taking a nap for a minute or two and I could just run around and do it. I never really thought I was going to get to travel and see a lot of these cemeteries that I wanted to. I mean, I still did as much as I could, but you never know how life's going to take a turn.
Right.
And now, my husband, one of his best friends just died suddenly a few years ago, and he hadn't even retired yet. And so it really affected him. My husband said, as soon as I can, I'm going to travel while I can. We better just do it while we're able, because you just don't know what life's going to
Right.
wait for you. His friend was like, oh yeah, a few years, maybe I'll do this or that. And so now it's like, we'll just do what we can um, to travel. And so we've kind of become the budget cruise people.
No, that's
So
fantastic.
you can cover a lot more of the world, it seems like, on a cruise. Your money goes farther, literally.
On a cruise.
So on a cruise, we can,
Yeah.
you can be flamboyant on a cruise too if you're one of those people. But what's interesting too, the types of cruises we take are longer ones. They're not, when you think of cruise, I always thought of kind of the party cruise that's like for a week where people are just
Right.
drinking heavily and I don't know, doing the Macarena 24/7. I don't know, but when you go on, I mean, nothing against the
The
Macarena.
ones you see the commercials for where they're like, it's a big party all the time.
Yeah, that's kind of like, don't tell me how to have fun. Come on. I know how to have fun. It involves a lot of books and maybe some
And
cemeteries.
some cemeteries.
You don't know what my idea of fun is. So yeah, but when you go on these longer ones, they always have cultural lectures. And
Mhm.
so these people give you a background, and sometimes they have language lessons, and you can ask them questions
fun.
about burial or whatever. They're probably like, oh, here comes that weird lady, she's going to ask me about burial customs again. But whatever. I mean, so it's worked out. And I guess my point is, you
really
just never
cool.
know when you're going to get to travel. I write travel books, but I knew that for a long time I was just doing armchair travel, and now that I actually get to travel around the world, I must say Earth is still my favorite planet, and I hope to see more of it.
I was gonna say, and
That's
you've managed
fantastic, Tui. Yeah.
make a really good go of seeing so much of it, and thankfully you like to write about it and stuff, so you get to tell
I know.
us
I hope to get another book out about
all
it.
about it.
I have a book. I have a couple books in mind. I want to update my cemetery symbols book, and then I've got another book that I'm working on about, well, all the different places I've seen recently.
Yeah. Well, and it's since you keep all your notebooks and stuff, it makes a great way to put it all down so that later everybody else goes back and they're like, oh, look at all these places she went and all these
Yeah.
cemeteries she saw, and
Oh
plus all the
gosh,
other things.
yes.
Because the fun thing about the traveling that you do is you're seeing so many different cultures. It was like your trip to Romania where you had a completely new experience in a cemetery that you've never had before
Right.
because
Yeah,
they
it's not,
treat it
it's a
differently.
surprise. It really was. It was very special.
Oh, I love that so much. Well, Tui, thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so
taking time
much.
out between travels and
Well,
book
thank you
writing.
for having me on. I'm a big fan. And like I said, I'm
Oh,
excited now
thank
that I
you.
get to kind of binge through and catch up on all the ones that I missed.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's this, like you were writing, this has been our thing. It's opened up all of these people that we didn't know loved cemeteries as much as Diane and I did. And we've had such a blast meeting so many
Oh my gosh,
taphophiles
yes.
and all the people who do stuff in cemeteries all the time. And it's opened our
There's a
eyes,
lot
for
of us
one thing,
out
to
there.
things
Who
we never
knew,
even
right?
thought about. But yeah, all the
Mhm.
people that we've been able to meet because
Incredible, really.
yeah, because we have a quirky love of a place where we bury our dead people. Like,
I know, who knew? Who knew? Oh, and
who knew?
if you're in Texas, I'm really looking forward to this because I'm going to be home this year. There's going to be a big, I missed it last year, a big Day of the Dead shindig over in
Ooh,
Oakland Cemetery in Dallas. And
how
Oakland's a
cool.
gorgeous historic cemetery there. And they also every year they have a really great cleanup day where they have really great food. Like I think I had some of the best brisket I've ever had there. So you
At the
can get a lot
cemetery.
of, you can,
Love
yeah, you
it.
come out, you eat your brisket and your potato salad and all this and that, and then you help clean up the
Oh,
cemetery.
fun.
And that happens actually a lot throughout Texas, but I think
That's really cool.
theirs is a especially big one. So if anyone's in the Texas area, that's a
Yeah.
really special thing to do. Or make a thing. I've never participated in a Day of the Dead celebration. My parents stumbled into one once and when were taken along, and I was always so jealous. Like, oh, but so yeah, I'm looking forward to that this year.
Yeah, we've talked
Mhm.
about it and we've seen pictures of them, but yeah, I've never participated, especially in the cemetery itself when they're decorating the graves and they're doing all
Yeah.
the food and like, yeah, I think that
But
would
turn
be
it
cool.
into a cleanup thing would be really cool.
Yeah, do your
Oh yeah.
celebration and then turn it around and you do it and get it already winterized for,
Yeah, winter. Here in Texas, most of the cleanups happen in May. That's kind of how we ended up with Memorial Day. I mean, is it sort of a
right,
vestige
for
dovetail into that?
Decoration
But
Day.
every time I go to, yeah, it'll say every time I go to a little country burial ground here, I look at the gate to see like, do they have an annual cleanup day or an annual decoration day? And I try to go to as many of those as I can.
Oh, I love it.
Anyway, I'm
Well,
going to talk your ear off. Thank you so
no,
much.
thank you again so much, Tui.
Thank
It has
you.
been
It was so much
absolutely,
fun.
yeah, absolutely so much fun.
We thank you for taking time to join us today for this ordinary, extraordinary chat. To learn more about today's discussion, please visit our website, theordinaryextraordinarycemetery.com, where you will find additional links in our show notes. And if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our channel, The Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery Podcast. This really makes us more visible to others on YouTube who may also enjoy our podcast.
And please don't forget to visit us on social media, where we share all kinds of cemetery photos, quotes, tidbits, and more. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery and on X at OrdExtraCem. So OrdExtraCem. If you enjoyed this or any of our episodes, please consider leaving a 5-star review and a comment on Apple's podcast, Spotify, or directly on our website. You can also leave those same comments on YouTube. Your positive reviews and enthusiasm for our show help others who love cemeteries and history to discover us and all of our ordinary, extraordinary stories. And if you're feeling extra generous and want to help support the podcast in a financial way, you can now buy Diane and I a cup of coffee, either through YouTube or on our website. Simply click on the coffee cup icon and it will allow you to make a donation.
Until we meet again.